What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hanna. And guys, here we are. It's a new episode. It's been a while since we've been doing an episode of Guarani Vision. We've obviously took some time off due to obviously the Olympics, obviously some vacation time, and obviously just really looking to what's been going on in Paraguayan football as a whole. I think it's been in the last few weeks, even though haven't had a show. Got a lot to talk about though, really. And I think what better way to start off than with the Olympics? Obviously I was fortunate enough to go to France for the three group stage games. It was a really fun experience being there in Bordeaux, being in Paris for the two games between Mali and Israel. Obviously, it ended in kind of heartbreaking circumstances a couple of days ago against Egypt, last week against Egypt. And I really wanted to be in this kind of situation where we could speak about the gold medal, but unfortunately, Paraguay will have no medal in this game, in this Olympics for the first time in 20 years. And I'll go to Fede on this one first because I think obviously with everything that's been going on in Paraguayan football, kind of this apathy you would say towards Paraguayan football about how the league's not really being sold as a hot commodity. The Paraguay national team, the senior team, isn't doing well. At least for these boys, these young kids on the Olympic team and Carlos Jara Salier, they really kind of rejuvenated some hope, even if it was for just a week over there in France.
Yeah, it is totally positive. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Hi, everyone listening to Guarani Vision. It's nice to be back. It's been a couple of weeks. You got to be honest with people, though, Roberto. You were the one taking time off. Ralph was working his ass off in Texas. I was working still here in Paraguay while we were watching you and Instagram have the best time in your life in Paris, just like a lot of people have these last couple of weeks in the Olympics. Hope you did have the best time. And we want to hear all about it, especially about the Paraguayan games, the Paraguayan athletes. I know you went to see several events, not only football. So it's a great experience. Well, obviously because you're a journalist, but because you're just like Ralph and me, very passionate about sports. So it's those experiences of a lifetime. You never forget about that, especially if we're going to talk about football. It was a good experience, guys. I mean, overall, very good and positive experience for the team, for the guys. We were just one game away from the medals, which is what I actually expected, what I actually wanted. And let's not forget all the trouble we had, right? Coming into this tournament, trying to build a good team. Props to the coach, props to every single player that got us here. We got to talk about the ones that obviously stood out in every single games, the ones that probably left us there hanging. And yeah, unfortunately, the penalties left us out against Egypt. But I think overall, we leave a good feeling for Paraguayan people that were really proud of this team and just looking ahead. Looking to the future, not just these a couple of games that we have for the senior national team, who we still don't know who's going to manage those games again against Uruguay and Brazil in less than a month. But I mean, these guys are the future of the national team, and it was good to see them step forward. I mean, they were not less of a champion as they headed into the Olympics, being the South American champion. And even though we did start off very badly against Japan, they were able to clear the way into that game against Egypt. I want to go step by step, talk about every single player, talk about everything that moved us in the Olympics, Roberto, because those guys almost had us in tears. We were so close to the medal, man.
So close yet so far. I'll go to Ralph on this one just to kick it off and obviously say hello because obviously it was a really good experience, I think, for a lot of these players. Obviously, it's been 20 years since Paraguay had been able to participate in a football tournament at the Olympics. And I think there was this real ambition that they could have gone very far. Like we had mentioned before the show, before the tournament started, our our ambition or at least our goal was to get a medal, even if it was bronze. I think that was the ceiling that they could hit, but it wasn't meant to be. I think you saw a lot of countries out there from, obviously not just in Europe, but also from Africa, from Asia, really demonstrate that these countries can play, and it was open for everyone. We saw now Morocco winning the bronze medal. They've had a really impressive showing throughout the entire tournament. They scored six against Egypt yesterday, and they win their first ever bronze medal in football, the first ever medal for North Africa in football. So clearly, it shows that even if Paraguay are still contender, it's not really one of the big powerhouses in world football. At least they demonstrated to some people that they could still play, and with the players that they have, they can at least strive to hopefully achieve a more competitive team heading into the qualifiers, which I think comes at a right time for a lot of these players who did perform well, for whoever the new manager is, we can't say if it's going to be Alfaro or anyone else, but I think it's certainly a test for a lot of these players that they passed and hopefully can make the case now for the national team when the qualifiers do come up.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Roberto, Fede, everybody watching and listening. I share the feeling that it was very positive overall, despite, of course, the first game, right? The first game, Paraguay lost 5-0 to Japan, a historic performance because the CONMEBOL team has never lost by such a big margin, especially to an AFC team. So I think there was obviously the red card, but I think a lot of people were worried about how is Paraguay going to respond. And then I think what we saw was a response in the Israel game, and this amazing kind of game where it's going back and forth. It's a lot of transitions, but it's really almost a battle of wills, and Paraguay came out on top. Then you get through a very tough Mali game, and then we have the quarterfinal, which was just such a tense match. I don't know. I mean, obviously we were all invested in it, but I just felt the whole time that game was so tense because Egypt had a very similar style to Paraguay. So one thing I liked about this Paraguay team that Carlos Harasaguer put out is it's not really a team of individuals, except Julian Cisa, of course, but we can talk about him in more depth. But really, is a team that works a lot, pressing, dropping back, winning balls back, not having much possession because they're very direct. And that's kind of more the traditional Paraguayan style that we remember, right? I mean, not the most technical team or a team that's going to try and build up with lots of phases of passing. It's really a team that's just going to try and hit you. And I think the goal against Egypt is almost that as well. When it's that very quick ball forward, in Cisa one touch, and it's Diego Gomez bursting into the box to score. That was really kind of the archetype of Carlos Harasaguer and what he was doing with that team. And so I think it was very exciting to see that Paraguay could only have 35% possession on average, but they were having more shots than their opponents regularly, except for the Japan game when they're down to 10 men. They're having way more entries into the final third because they're getting so direct. And I just thought that was very interesting to see after we've struggled with Berizzo, with Barros-Schelotto, with Garnero trying to play slightly differently. Barros-Schelotto's team was maybe the closest to this, but still it wasn't the same. And so it was just a way of saying, look, this is how Paraguayan players are brought up through youth teams. This is how they're going to prosper and play better. And so maybe that's also a nod towards Alfaro if we're talking about the senior team. But yeah, overall, I think it was very positive, and especially we should just quickly talk about some of the circumstances, right? Paraguay came into it without Diego Gonzalez, who gets injured. Then you get Enzo Gonzalez gets injured, and he's unfortunately torn his ligaments. You had Marcelo Fernandez, who maybe might not have played if Diego Gonzalez was fit. Marcelo Fernandez is really well, scores 3 goals, and then he gets that booking at the very end, and he misses the game through suspension. So one of your top scorers suspended for the Egypt game. Then there was a whole travel. The Paraguay's train was delayed. Then they tried to get a flight that was delayed. They had to stay the extra night in Paris. So when they finally arrive, it's about 24 hours or maybe less than 24 hours before the game. So it's not perfect preparation. So all of that worked in, and none of that was an excuse because Paraguay still went out and gave it their all and were just that one penalty kick away from getting into the semifinals.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fede, when you look at all the circumstances that's happened to them, yes, of course, we as fans, we always want to demand more. And, it doesn't matter. It feels like Paraguay have been through certain circumstances or similar circumstances, and they always find their way to go through. I think, when you look at it from a broader perspective, yes, it would have been nice to go for a medal, and I think Paraguayans would be very happy, but you can't please these fans. You can't please fans, even if they go short of a medal, if they get a medal or whatever. There's always going to be people that are going to complain. And I think, there are some players out there that was on the spotlight, particularly Julio Enciso. I think someone like him had a really good tournament. I think he kind of shut up a few haters or at least doubters wrong. I mean, yeah, you still probably have some here and there, but he made a really good case that he made his claim of wanting to play in the Olympics, and he performed it the best way that he could. Him, Diego Gomez, I really like what someone like Marcos Gomez as well did so well in that midfield. I think there are a lot of players out there that have really impressed. So I wanted to ask you what you've liked from this team and maybe what you didn't like from this side that maybe could have allowed them to strive for better in this tournament.
Yeah, before even talking about the players itself, Roberto, I wanted to go back to what Ralph was talking about. I mean, that preparation going into the game against Egypt, because he lived it. I believe with the players also, you saw how they struggled to get to the
I was
venue.
there. I was at the airport. I was at the airport going back home, or at least waiting to go back home. I see the Paraguayan players just right outside waiting to board a flight, and they don't even board that flight that same day. It's crazy.
That's not professional, right? That doesn't look good from the organization either, because I was told that Paraguay didn't get the answers they wanted, and they left the players there pretty much strangled after a game, while they should have been getting recovery time. And I think that was key. I think that was very important, because Egypt wasn't going through that situation. I mean, they were already resting, they were getting ready, they were already at the venue 24 hours before the game. And you don't usually see that in FIFA games. You don't usually see that even in CONMEBOL, which is in South America, where we have a lot of a lot of problems to organize games also. But I mean, you're playing every 2-3 games under very hard weather conditions, and there was even the possibility, or the FA tried to give the players one more day, but the Olympics didn't want to have anything to do with that situation. And I think that played out for Egypt, and it was something that we weren't able to handle. And you could see it in the game also. You saw players that weren't 100% fit, and when the game was close to coming into penalties, we didn't have that energy boost that we needed. Besides the fact that we while the competition was going on, we ended up losing very important players, like Ralph mentioned. I mean, and so when he came into the team, it was his first game starting, and you thought, hey, he could take that spot. He could be that link with Julio in offense. You wanted to see that with Diego also, and it was really excited to see them for the first time playing together. And another injury. I mean, these things just follow us, not only on this team but also on the senior national team, and it's such a shame. But to stand out several players, I mean, I think Ralph hit it right there on the key, because those are all players that are on my list. I mean, Marcos Gomez, Marcelo Fernandez, Diego Gomez, and special reference to our captain, Fabian Balbuena. I mean, just everything he left aside to be with these guys, take that role in defense and coming through in very important games. Also, he even scored on one of the games. So I'm really happy with him, with taking that role of being the captain away from Gustavo Gomez in the senior national team, but also taking it now to with the young kids. And I think he was a good captain overall also. And Gustavo Caballero, guys, I mean, talk about this guy. He came in the list, he came out of the list, he came back into the list. He thought he wasn't even going to get a minute, and he came into several games. And let's not forget about this kid, because maybe in a couple of years we might see him playing in Europe. We might see him playing in a big team or something like that. They're going to look at his resume. They're going to see that he played in this tournament, and he has so much to grow still, even though he did make a couple of mistakes. He erased himself pretty much from that last game against Egypt also. I mean, those mistakes are the ones that I believe cost us during the tournament. Mistakes that we can't make anymore, that Julian Ciso made the mistake of not giving up the ball when he needed to, and on the counter attack, Marcelo Fernandez gets that second yellow card, which took, I believe, our best player away from the game that we needed him on, which was that game against Egypt. And it sucked that we couldn't have Marcelo Fernandez, because after that, our coach had to improvise on the starting team because we didn't have enough. So it was too many problems to really get into that medal game, which I wanted us to be in. But I'm really proud of the guys. And obviously, Marcos Gomez, I mean, look at him. This is not a player that we thought was going to stand out in that midfield. And he was probably the best player in the midfield. Even the coach said it after the tournament, right? I mean, getting so many balls back, being so aggressive. That's the kind of player we saw when he was starting in Olympia. He mentioned that he's been having knee problems lately. That's why he probably hasn't looked like himself, but he had a great tournament, and I just hope many of these players can make the leap. Hopefully some of these players can change clubs. I mean, we already know what's going to happen with Diego Gomez going to Brighton, but I'm looking forward to seeing Marcos Gomez maybe leaving the Paraguayan league, maybe even see Marcelo Fernandez have an opportunity in the European football after the goals and the quality of goals that he really scored. I mean, he really surprised me, guys. I don't know if you guys were surprised by another player, but for me, the exciting player, the one that I enjoyed the most, was really Marcelo Fernandez.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think with Marcelo Fernandez, what surprises people is that he's 22 now, I think. And because he's at Libertad, and Libertad have so many good players, he doesn't have like a starring role there or even regular minutes. So people maybe didn't know what to expect from him, or didn't assume that he would be able to take on that role of being the key man and the key player in some of those games. But he did, and he'd actually done it in the Sudamericana in some of those important games as well. So I think now he's shown this pattern where he can do something. The issue is, because of Libertad and the way they operate, it's very hard sometimes to move from the club or find playing time. But we're hopeful that with what he's shown here, then people are going to take more of an interest. And I think for Marco Gomez, one thing that's really interesting is, yeah, for me, it's like a redemption story in a way, because with Gomez, there was a time at Olympia, I think it's under Julio Cesar Cáceres, when they just basically did not lose when he was in the team. He became, for that winning run, he became more important than Richard Ortiz, because Ortiz was getting injured. And so it was really Gomez holding together that midfield. But then, like I think Fede was saying, there were knee problems, injury problems, and he never really looked that interesting of a player. You kind of thought, okay, maybe he's not going to develop like we had hoped. And then I think this tournament has been some kind of redemption to show, well, actually at a very high level, not the top level, but at this very high level, he can do it. And being that ball winner is really important, because that's what Paraguay really missed in the Copa America. Apart from Cubas, once Cubas was suspended, we didn't really have somebody in that role. So I think thinking about the senior team as well, that could be interesting. And then the last player I just wanted to mention, that I thought was very interesting, was Alexis Cantero, who came in the last two games. I think he's played a lot as a left back for Guarani, but where Harasaguer put him was actually left midfield, right in front of Rivas, the left back. And that was very interesting, because I think we were starting to see that maybe he could transition to that kind of position, because he is a very attacking, when he plays left back, he's very attacking. There was obviously this idea that, well, maybe he's more technical, maybe he's not as strong in the air, he's not particularly strong in the air, so maybe it's better to have him in midfield. And by playing those two games and performing very well, I think he could be an interesting option for Guarani to use there. And I mean, left-sided players are always a premium, so I think that could be very, very interesting. But overall, I think a very positive tournament for lots of players.
I was to say as well, yeah, Fede, I wanted to go as well on mentioning Cantero, because I feel like he's someone that, for some reason, I just really like the way that he played, and I thought he did very well in the games that he stepped up. I think as well, for a national team that needs more fullbacks, or they need to have players that play in their natural positions, you got another one out there that hopefully the next new manager can look at and say, I want some of that, and hopefully that they can help them.
Yeah, that's a position we really struggled, right? During the Copa America, Nestor Jimenez really did not convince absolutely anybody. That's why Ralph is throwing out there the name of Alexis Cantero. We have, if we're going to talk eventually about the local league, we have Diego Leon coming in strong in Cerro Porteño, just 3 games and already has 2 goals under his shoulders. I mean, we have a couple of young players that are coming through. You just don't know if the new coach is going to go with them, right? Especially defense, if he's gonna take those gambles. Playing by the sides is one of the hardest jobs right now, playing at the international level, because you have to go against Messi, you have to go against Vinicius Jr., you have to go against probably the strongest players of the other teams. Just ask Gustavo Velasquez, right? And just how much he suffered in the Copa America being a right back. I don't know how we're going to solve that problem, obviously in the senior national team, but it is really good to see these young guys develop. Alan Nunez, the right back, Alexis Cantero on the left side, Daniel Rivas, also somebody that came from the Cerro Porteño Youth Academy, now playing for Nacional. I mean, we have several players that hopefully keep on developing and end up being those players, Roberto, because we have a lot of players that have left the country, but they haven't been able to be that player. I mean, Blas Riveros wasn't that player. He's back in Argentina now. Alan Rodriguez is playing in Rosario Central also, but he was never called up. We have Raul Cáceres back in the day, who was playing a long time in Brazil, but was never called up to the national team. We have a lot of left backs, and I don't know what the next coach is really going to think on what kind of team he's going to build, because we're less than a month away and we still have no idea who's going to manage the Albirroja.
That's another discussion for another day. I mean, we could speak right now and there's already an official announcement, but all the talks are still with Alfaro. We don't know if that's going to be official. We still need to wait and see. But yeah, it's not really a good situation to be at. It feels like every time there's something going with Paraguay, there's always like some sort of drama happening in the background, be it from Olympic preparation to now this. So we'll have to wait and see. But one player that, yeah, go ahead, Fede, you were saying?
Oh, you're going to talk about Julio Enciso, right? I mean, we're going to talk about everything that happened around Julio Enciso during this tournament and even afterwards, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like in Ralph, I think this is something that I think we've always had this discussion about him that he is a talented player and he deserves all the plaudits that he gets for being so good, especially playing in English football. But you just feel like sometimes that the way that he speaks, the way that he's, obviously we saw those comments from Hara Salier. Maybe they were taken out of context about how he's kind of a ball hog, that, maybe the way that he plays is kind of, giving him all this hype could lead to a path of, obviously, hyping him so much that they don't fill into expectations. We see all that with similar players like Sergio Diaz, for example, who was the previous big jewel of Paraguayan football that, had high hopes, went to Real Madrid, didn't work out the way that he wanted. And now we have someone like Enciso. And, again, even he responded. So, yeah, it's been a debate. I don't know, Fede, you've been debating this about in group chats, but Ralph and I definitely have about maybe he just needs to just shut up a little bit, not use a lot of social media, not even speak on local radio stations, just do what he has to do and let his football do the talking, I guess.
Yeah, I think the first thing about Julio Enciso's tournament was that he had an excellent tournament. He actually won the second most duels in the games behind Gomez. Gomez is like a monster. He was like way ahead of everybody in the team. But I mean, that's very interesting. And that just showed how much he was working with the team. But then it does have its disadvantages, like the foul, or the missed tackle, sorry, that causes Fernandez to have to track back, or he's very single-minded. He's very individual. He's very confident. And really, you don't see that very much in Paraguayan players. Just to give a quick contrast to Diego Gomez, as they're probably going to be teammates. People say Diego Gomez was like the way they described him as coaches was painfully shy. Like he just wouldn't talk. He wouldn't come out of his shell. He cries a lot. He even admits it in interviews. He gets very emotional. He's not this guy brimming with self-confidence. Naturally, it kind of comes to him on the pitch. Whereas Enciso is like a totally different character. The only Paraguayan I can think of is Chilavert. He's very similar. He's like very stubborn, very single-minded. And for people, they find that a bit difficult, especially because he's so young. Now, the question is, can he manage this and channel it correctly? And I think that's where Hara Salier was going, right? He was saying, look, this guy is already playing in England. He's playing very well, but do we want to keep trying to lift him up? Does he need it? Because he seems to be confident enough. Remember when Paraguay were stranded in the airport, for example, he went on a live on his Instagram complaining about everybody and everything. And I don't think many other players would have wanted to do that, to kind of expose themselves, but also to have the confidence to do it. I mean, there's obviously the bleach blonde hair, which is his other kind of, demonstration that he doesn't mind going
and
out.
his significant others as well. There's always that drama as well with the significant others. Just putting it out.
He has lots of girlfriends, I think, at the moment throughout the last few months when he's been injured. So people are wondering what he's doing off the pitch. There's a lot of questions about him. That brings you also into the idea of how much the injuries have affected him, because of course he had so much time off the pitch. And then that was a really important thing just to go back to how much we've seen him play, we haven't seen him play that much. The Copa America, you can tell now, he was still really recovering, because in one of the interviews he gives, I think it's after the Mali game, maybe he said, look, I've been out for almost 7 months. I'm feeling much better now. I'm feeling good. I'm starting to get some of that kind of game rhythm back. So there was all of these things that really came to what I thought was a very good performance on the pitch, but he is very, very individualistic. So in terms of, if you're going to have a team, you're going to have to build it around him, because he's not going to fit into your tactical structure. I mean, if Alfaro turns up and says, we're going to play like this, and Ciso will play how he wants. So you're going to have to build the team around him. But I think he does have that talent for that. And then it's that question of, can he really channel that self-confidence and not turn into something that can end up being destructive?
Yeah, I mean, Fede, I mean, you've seen players over the years. I mean, you could go all the way back. You mean from Chilaver to now in CISO, that's 30 years of Paraguayan players out there. And if Ralph's saying that he hasn't seen some player like him with that confidence since him, it shows that we're dealing with a different type of player. But there's always that big but of like, well, what his personal life like this, maybe he's too individualistic, maybe he gets into spats, but clearly, you know, I had the fortune of meeting him a few times, and for me, he's a nice guy. Like I've spoken to him, he's always been a very nice guy. It seems like the his teammates, at least from this last Olympics, like him as well. But maybe there are some of those of the senior experience, like a Jara Salier, or even back then with, you know, Gustavo Gomez or whatever, that just maybe isn't fond of him because he's not cut from the same sort of um you know, root, or I don't know what the word is, but just cut from the same sort of way that these guys are like.
Yeah, Julio Enciso's kind of dividing opinions also here in Paraguay, I would even say, especially because of his background. I mean, let's remember here in Paraguay, you have Cerro and Olimpia. Those are the two big, strong teams. And a lot of people divide their attention and the way they think because of the shirt they like. And Julio doesn't have that background. He's from Libertad, so he's always going to get that criticism from several fans, from Olimpia fans, and he's not going to have that backup, from the fan base. So when he does things wrong, people are going to go obviously on him, especially with being under the shadow of what happened with Almiron lately also, because Almiron was probably going to be the star. A lot of people were waiting for Miguel Almiron to be the star of the national team, and he never lived up to that expectation. Just throwing another name out there like you guys just threw with Sergio Diaz. I mean, we've seen so many Paraguayan players go to Europe. You thought that they were going to be that huge player, that big star that we needed in the national team, and it ended up not being that way. Even Almiron just was he said something completely out of the way at a certain moment about Paraguayan legends, and that old players shouldn't say absolutely anything about the new players, and that was something that a lot of people didn't like. And Julio Cesar is kind of in that situation again, showing his personality, being himself under Garnero and Libertad. And when he was just starting off, it was very important that he had alongside Tacuara Cardoso, right? I mean, just such an experienced player. Roque Santa Cruz also, but Tacuara was all over him. And I think this is the reason why Garnero asked Tacuara to be all over this kid, because he knew that he was special, but he needed that guiding, he needed that leadership, and he still needs it now, I believe, because he's still young and he's still going through so much. He's earned so much money in such little time, and just like you guys are saying, I mean, he dyed his hair, he had so many girlfriends, he's going through so much, and he still needs to be the best player or the best Paraguayan player, because that's what's expected of him, and that's what everybody thinks that he can be, even what he thinks he can be, because he knows that he can be the best player. That's why he's always asking for the ball. That's why he's always trying to do the difference in offense. But I mean, he needs to be more of a team player. And I think during these Olympics, they try to do that with him. They try to get that out of him, especially the coaching staff. But in certain moments, Julio wanted to be Julio, and he made a couple of mistakes. And we're going to have to go through this process with him. And hopefully he ends up being that player that we need in the national team, but he ends up being a role player, because I think he's a very good player right now, but he's not that star yet. I don't know if he's even going to start the season in Brighton. I mean, he needs to earn that spot now after not being in the preseason with a new coach. So he needs to go back to his club, do his thing back there, focus on football. I'm totally with you on that, Roberto. But hey, I used to love Chilavert back in the 90s. I used to love every single interview he gave. I used to love his reactions in the games. I'm loving what I'm seeing from Julio Enciso. He has that fire in him. He has that will to make his teammates better, and he wants that weight on his shoulders. There's a lot of players that run away from that spotlight. He doesn't run away from it. He wants that spotlight, and I would love that from him. He doesn't want to play just in Brighton. He wants to play in Manchester City. He wants to play in the big teams, and he has that ambition, Roberto. So if you have a player like that, I want him on my team. I want him to be the best Julio Enciso that he can be.
I was just reminded of one thing, of just how much he believes in himself. It was Libertad against Olimpia, I think, and they get a penalty at the very end of the game, and Tacuara takes the penalties. Tacuara is he's the guy, right? And then Ciso comes up and he says, I'm going to take this penalty. And I can't remember if it was either to win the game or tie the game, but it was an important one, stoppage time. He's like a kid, and he steps up and he puts the penalty away. And that was, even from that really young age, it was this, I believe in myself, and two, I'm going to lead the team. And I'm sure he will end up being a Paraguay captain at some point in his career.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. I think we're dealing with someone that could genuinely be a big star for Paraguayan football that we haven't had in forever, but it's all up to see how he can deal with this situation with, obviously, with Brighton this season, and obviously with Paraguay with the qualifiers coming up. Wanted to switch gears also to what we've seen with some of these players that got the interesting move. You mentioned Diego Gomez, Ralph, going to Brighton. I think it's a great move for him. I think it's a really good move. I think obviously we've kind of spoken about how Brighton had always been kind of interested in this player, and it looks like it's going to happen, but it's going to happen in the winter, actually. So he'll get the chance, and we're speaking right here on the day that he scored another great goal against Toronto FC in the Leagues Cup. It was a really nice strike. Matias Rojas also got on the score sheet as well. And the other Paraguayan that also joined, Hector David Martinez, he was the third Paraguayan on that team. He got sent off after 14 minutes. So we got everything in that game for Inter Miami. But obviously Diego Gomez getting the goal. And I think getting the move to Brighton is a smart one, certainly because of his age, because of the way that he performs. And obviously he has another Paraguayan that helps him. It's been a long time since we've had two Paraguayans in a Premier League team, since Sunderland with Christian Riveros and Paulo da Silva. But I think ultimately, when you look at just how in the situation that he's in, yes, it would be nice for him to go and start the new season afresh. But it looks like, Inter Miami want him to finish off the season, see if he can win some trophies with Messi and company, be it a Leagues Cup or an MLS Cup, and then, yeah, just go start afresh at a new country.
Yeah, but I think it's a very good move in terms of the timing and also the way they're structuring it, because we were just talking about how he's a very shy person. It was a huge moment when he goes into Miami. He's like told that day by his agent, and the next day he's flying to Miami, he's he's never lived in another country. He's not really experienced other cultures. That was a huge culture shock. And if you remember, he was a bit slow to start at Inter Miami this time last year, because his family couldn't get visas, so he was very much alone. And so this way of structuring it, I think, is much better. One, he goes when he has a teammate there in Julio Enciso. But two, I think he has this time to kind of wind down with Miami, hopefully win a title. The season's going to finish in November. So he actually has the whole of December off, because he's played so much football because of the Sudamericana, the Olympics, everything. He's been playing so much football. So get some time off and then can really hit the ground running in January in Brighton. So I think it works very well. And then the other thing is, I don't know too much about the new coach of Brighton, but if it's similar to De Zerbi in terms of playing style, which I guess they've looked for someone similar, then I think he's going to fit very well, right? Because he's that box to box. He's able to win the ball back, but he's also able to find his way into the box. He's very versatile. So I think he's going to fit that system very well. And I think if he went this time last year to Brighton, it would have been too much. But the fact that he's had this time now and into Miami, he's proved he can do it outside of the country. He's proved he can perform at a very high level, because like he scored last night. I mean, he's scored important goals, made assists. I think this is like a well-structured and well-timed move for him.
Yeah, I mean, Fede, are you a big fan of this move?
I'm a big fan of Diego Gomez ever since he left Paraguay. I mean, just seeing him grow and play with the players that he's playing, obviously, in Inter Miami, this must be such a good experience for him, just growing as a player and evolving, learning so much, especially from Busquets, right, which has probably been his partner in that midfield, and taking this next move, a new chapter in his life, having somebody alongside him that has that experience, that has won so many Champions League. I mean, I think he's gonna, just like Ralph said, I mean, he's burning those chapters in the life that he needs to become that European player, and I'm so happy for him. I think he's gonna have a huge and long career in the European football, just because he's so concentrated in football. He doesn't have any problems outside of the pitch. He's totally different, like you guys are saying, from the profile of Julio Enciso, the kind of player that he is. I don't know how happy he's gonna be coming into the winter, obviously in Brighton, right in the middle of the winter. Hopefully he gets ready for that situation, because the Miami weather is totally different to what he's gonna have in Brighton. But he's gonna have Julio and Cesar there, and they're gonna link up, and it's gonna be beautiful to see them play together.
Yeah, I mean, Ralph, you're going from Asunción, a hot Asunción. Well, even before that, San Juan Bautista, Asunción, Miami, and now to the south side of England in the middle of the winter. That's a big challenge, but also it feels like for someone like Diego Gomez, he's had all these challenges all his life. Why can't he can't tick off another one?
Yeah. Don't forget, I mean, this is a guy that did his ligaments in 2019. He's about to get back the beginning of 2020, gets dengue, so he misses start of the season. Then there's a pandemic, he doesn't play. He only made his senior debut in 2022, which is crazy to think about now. You know, just in 2 years, he's become such an important player. He's captained Paraguay at these different levels as well. I mean, it's just an incredible thing. And like you were saying, Robert, I think everything that's thrown at him, he just kind of, you know, passes that hurdle or that obstacle without much fuss, right? He just kind of gets on with it.
Yeah,
And so here's another thing, but I think he can do it.
he got injured right before the Copa America, but gets ready for the Olympics and has probably the best. He was probably the best player for Paraguay. So it's crazy. One other crazy situation that we're going on is this Ramon Sosa ordeal, and I'm gonna go to Fede on this one because this is weird. I mean, obviously, we had known for some time that Ramon Sosa had gotten interest from various clubs around Europe. There had been obviously the talks of Chelsea, Wolverhampton, Brentford, many other clubs, but it looked like Nottingham Forest were going to get the signature of the kid from Maracana, but it seems like when all the moves, the contract was ready, they kind of changed, and Talleres resisted. Now that there's been some rumors in just the last 48 hours, Ramon Sosa going into the squad to play against River Plate in the Copa Libertadores, which begins in a couple of days, to then now saying that reportedly he doesn't want to play and that he's just training by himself. This is it's such a big mess, Fede. I mean, I think for the better of him, he should just make this move, go to England right now, because I think, you're just kind of tanking his, well, not tanking, but you're kind of stagnating his development as a whole, even just, training without the players. But I honestly, if I'm him or whatever kind of agents or whatever kind of people that is in his inner circle trying to help him out, I'd say, try to, get this move, man. Honestly.
It should have happened a long time ago. It's been months and months, and what have they done with Ramon Sosa? I mean, just having this kid so confused. At a certain moment, he was going to the MLS. I even believe they were talking about a huge bid from LA Galaxy, other teams, Tottenham. I remember a whole bunch of Premier League teams that were on a long list, and then it was Nottingham Forest. And yeah, it's a good Premier League team. We would say we had Brian Ojeda. I mean, he made a leap at a certain point to that team, but Ramon Sosa has just probably been one of the best players to leave the Paraguayan league in these last couple of years. So you want to see him go to a big team, but I mean, why just hasn't this deal been made? Why has Talleres put so many problems along the way to let go of Ramon Sosa? Obviously, they are looking to make a huge number, a huge deal with him. They don't usually sell players to the Premier League. So they don't have that experience, I believe. But this is not the way to treat one of your best players. This is not the treatment that we thought Ramon Sosa was going to get, especially after those last games last season, where you saw that many of his teammates, the whole club was pretty much saying goodbye to him, and they were giving him the best farewell because he was really playing or was the best player in the team back then. And now he's just, this is not the way to go, you know, and it looks ugly from him because this is the way that he has to leave the team. And hopefully the deal gets done. I don't know how it's going to get done, but hopefully it gets done, because if the player is stuck in Talleres for 6 months and not playing, or if he eventually comes back to Talleres and has to play in the Argentinian league, it's just time wasted, right? I mean, he should have done the preseason already with a European team, and he hasn't done that. So I don't even know if he's going to be against Uruguay, against Brazil, because he hasn't been playing ever since the Copa America ended, guys. So that's what I'm worried about. He hasn't made the leap, and he should already be in Europe, Ralph. Why hasn't this been made? Is Nottingham really lying about the situation, or is Talleres the one holding the player?
It's been a confusing situation, because if you remember, at one point he said he dumped his agent. We assumed he'd moved to another one. I think Julian Enciso's agent, because him and Julian Enciso are like that. By the way, in the Copa America, they're together. Like every
It was
time.
Danny Campos. Danny Campos was his former agent, Ralph, or at least was his agent at some point.
But now my understanding is he still is. So although he said this, it didn't actually happen, because you can't just dump your agent. There's FIFA contracts, there's that kind of thing. So there's been all of this confusion, and now we've got the new thing, which seems to be between Talleres and Nottingham Forest, and it seemed they were on a good, what's the word, like in a good relationship, where Talleres said, yeah, of course, we don't want you to get injured just before. So the idea was not to play to not get injured. That's been the whole thing, right? Just let him train. Let's not put him at risk. This is for them, you know, a multi-million-dollar investment. So you're not going to put him at risk. But now Talleres is saying, well, our patience has run out. And I'm guessing this is just a negotiating tactic from Talleres. They don't want to hold on to him. They want the money. They can go and get two Ramon Sosa types from somewhere else with the money. So, or at least with the potential to be like him. So I don't know. They're kind of stuck in there, but we still have plenty of time, right? We still have a few weeks so until the window shuts. So, I mean, it could drag on a little bit more, but you would hope that this gets done, and this is just some kind of negotiations between those two parties, the two clubs.
It's never easy, really. It's never easy when it comes to dealing with these kind of stuff. But ultimately, if he does make this move, I'll go to Ralph on this one. I'm sure it's a good one, because for the money that they're gonna spend for someone like him, and obviously playing with a manager like Espirito Santo, they're obviously not in the circumstance of what Brighton is with Enciso and Gomez, where they look to be on the upwards, whereas Forest are in that situation. They've been fighting to not get relegated over the last few seasons. I think that's Ramon's reality at the time being, even though it's a pretty talented team, actually, to say the least, for a Premier League side.
Yeah, I think the key thing, because if you look at the transfers that worked recently and the ones that haven't, so when Ojeda went, it wasn't, Nuno wasn't the manager. Where when Enzo Gonzalez, who hasn't got any time at Wolves, it's also an English manager who doesn't speak any Spanish. So I think this does seem to be like the right fit in terms of him coming in with that coach, and also a coach that is going to allow for a bit of freedom for a winger like Sosa to play. Because remember, I mean, Sosa is small. He's small, very talented, but he's not going to be like in the thick of it in terms of physicality like Diego Gomez will be. He's fine on that kind of athleticism and that kind of, we say the choque and the roce, right, in Spanish. Like he's going to be fine there, Gomez. But Sosa's a different build of player and type of player, so you do have to use him in a bit of a different way. But I think Forest at the moment, with the coach they have, that can work well for him. So fingers crossed it gets over the line and we see another Paraguayan in the Premier League.
I know it would be crazy. Like, of course, this is all assuming that it does go through, but this time next season, and it's unfortunate that Enzo Gonzalez suffered this injury with the ACL that happened in the game against Mali. But you have Miguel Miron, who we haven't heard anything yet, by the way, that he's going to be leaving Newcastle or anything. So technically he's still a player. So that's one. You have obviously Enzo Gonzalez, who is there. So that's two. And Ciso, three. Gomez coming in January, 4. And then a fifth one with Ramon Sosa. 5 Paraguayan players in the Premier League potentially by this time in about 6 months, Fede. That's incredible.
And I wouldn't be surprised if other players keep on going, because they are just opening the doors for other players. I mean, just what Julio has done lately, and Even Almiron, his time in Newcastle, I mean, he's been able to do a journey there. He's been able to stay there for several seasons. So I think that just shows that our players are ready for that kind of league, one of the top leagues, obviously, in the world. But I mean, this just opens up doors for more and more players, guys. I mean, we're seeing what Cuenca is doing in AC Milan, doing this preseason, getting time also in an Italian team. Hopefully Diego Gonzalez also does this in Lazio very shortly, very soon. So I'm really excited with all these young players that are coming in to the European football. This is something that we haven't had for a very long time, and this is something that I particularly have been waiting for. And finally, we're seeing a lot of young players in the local league that are making that leap to the European football.
Yeah, 100%. And looking at players that obviously get the genesis of all that is what we see in the local league. What we're going to switch gears to what we've seen. But before that, obviously, we have to mention what was going on in the Sudamericana, because obviously we have two Paraguayan teams still left in the competition, as it's an all Paraguayan affair. Libertad against Sportivo Ameliano for a spot in the quarterfinals. Not what we had expected at the beginning, but hey, that's one Paraguayan team in the quarterfinals, Ralph. I mean, odds would say Libertad are the favorites just because of the quality that they have, but Armeniano can do something, honestly. It can go either way, especially in these all Paraguayan affairs.
Yeah, I think very much. Ameliano has become famous for their cup, right? The Copa Paraguay and the Super Cup, and they've become this kind of team that can do something special in those games. And now they did it also in the Sudamericana, and the way Libertad have started the league, as we also talk about the local league. I mean, they have not looked very good. We talked last year, I think it was, even though they won the title, it was one of the lowest points totals they'd had in a while. So there was a bit of pressure on Ariel Galeano, that is he really getting the best out of his side? And at the moment we're seeing that they're struggling in the league. They're way off the pace. They're fortunate that Cerro lost yesterday as we record. So that meant they didn't open up a 6-point gap already. We're only 4 games into the season. But you have Dos de Mayo that are up there 6 points ahead of Libertad. So, I mean, they're not playing great. And so going into this match, there's going to be some doubts, I think there's always been doubts around Galeano because he's very young. He's very inexperienced. Now he's got like the wolf at the door in Daniel Garnero, who could just easily step back into Libertad, right? They're talking about Garnero could step in at Libertad or at Cerro. Either one of the teams, depending on which team maybe decides to get rid of their managers. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on Libertad going into this match, whereas for Ameliano, it's more like, well, we're not expected to get through. Let's give it what we've got. And through Saravia, that very defensive coach, I mean, he's going to just make it really difficult in those 2 games for sure. So I wouldn't bank on Libertad getting through. It could be very close.
Yeah, I'm also expecting a very tight head-to-head between Ameliano and Libertad in the Sudamericana. Ameliano has a coach that's very strategic. He knows how to build strategies around these big teams and how to play without having the ball much on the counterattack. That's probably his specialty. And Saravia, I mean, he managed Libertad back in the day, so he knows pretty much what he's going up against. He knows the coaching staff. That's kind of an advantage. Also, he has a lot more experience, and Ameliano has probably been the best team in the international stage this whole year, guys. I mean, we didn't have a good time in Libertadores, and Sudamericana was the place for this Ameliano team, and they're looking to make more history and more history. They're going to have a new stadium by the end of the year. They're building a facility also for the youth team, so they're thinking ahead. They're thinking of the future, but they're really enjoying what they've done in this 2024 season. And if they take out Libertad, I would even say Ariel Galeano's job is going to be on the line, just because of this bad start with the Clausura. And even though I do think Ariel Galeano is in it for the long run, when Garnero leaves the national team and he's out there in the market, any team can pick him up, just like Ralph was saying. It could be Cerro Porteño if they don't pick up their stuff. Also, a lot of people are thinking about him because he is the manager that has won it all lately in the local league. So he's up there, and eventually I do think one of these managers is going to be blown out. They're going to have to let somebody go, because So far, I mean, no team has really blown out anybody. We had Cerro take out Sportivo Luqueño a couple of games ago 4-0 at home, but they were not themselves against General Caballero, and they ended up losing against a team that's fighting for relegation to stay in first division. So, I mean, it's totally opened up, just like most of the clausuras are, Roberto, Raf. You know, they're very tight and with a lot of surprises. So far, it's 2 de Mayo, guys. It's the Gallo Norteño doing the business so far.
It's incredible, Ralph, isn't the Gallo Norteño, the team over there in Pedro Juan Caballero really just leading the way for now. You know, obviously we saw Cerro drop points, Libertad drop points as well. And again, we're still early. Things can change, but hey, it's a good start for them.
Yeah, very good start from Dos de Mayo. That when they got promoted to Intermedia, it was that home form. They were so good because remember, Paraguayan football is very concentrated around Asuncion, and they're like a good long bus ride away up at the very top of the country, and it's a kind of famous area where it's slightly higher. Paraguay is a very flat country, it's slightly higher, and you get this like fog and mist sometimes in the games, and especially now this time of year it's very cold. Like I can see Fede has all his windows shut behind him because he's cold, so that might start playing into it because they won again at home against Nacional, and if they keep up that home form, then it becomes very interesting. They're almost, the way they're playing, they're pretty much safe from relegation, so their mind is really set on, can we qualify for the Sudamericana and start to take teams from other countries up here to Pedro Juan Caballero. So let's see what they can do and how they can hold on. But it's really the home form that's going to be so important for them, because that's what saw them do so well in Intermedia.
Absolutely. I was actually surprised, Roberto, that they were able to maintain most of the players that they used in the Apertura, because they already had a good tournament during the Apertura. Different from what Chinidense did, for instance, last year in 2023, where they had a good opportunity, but they had a really bad clausura. This is not happening with Dos de Mayo. They're keeping up their pace, and look out for this team. They might even make it to Libertadores if they have a better season than Olimpia, or if Cerro Porteño doesn't have a good season. Watch out for this team. This could be the real surprise of the year, Dos de Mayo.
Hope so. We hope so. We need something different. I mean, obviously, we are all fans of certain teams, so we don't want that. But hey, as a neutral, we definitely want to see some of those underdogs do something. So it'll be a very interesting clausura, as obviously we're getting right into the start of it. We'll see what happens as the league goes through, and also everything else that's been going on in Paraguayan football. Obviously, we'll have it all here on Guarani Vision, as we always do every week, as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.